Hello folks, I hope you're all doing well. Thought I would do a quick video of books that I have read this year. So I'm always reading like 5 books at once. Literally, usually there's like 5 books I've got spread out, and then I'm reading a chapter of each, all at the same time. So there are several books that I've started this year and still haven't finished, and maybe I'll save those for another video. What I wanted to do is just bring out a selection of books that I had started this year and finished this year. So, without further ado, here we go. They're not in really any particular order, they're just in whatever order I happen to pick them up off the shelf. Okay, I've mentioned this. I read a bit of it in early videos this year. A. Dogan, Mystical Realist. I've owned this book for years and just hadn't gotten around to reading it. I would dip into it and look at little bits and pieces and look up things in it, but I hadn't read it from cover to cover. So this year I decided to read it from cover to cover. I think it's good. This is the sort of standard book on Dogan, like his life and his work, and it's been kind of the standard book on Dogan for years. When was it first published? In the 70s, I think. Well, this one says copyright 2004, but I know that's wrong because the book has existed since at least the 70s. I don't know, maybe this is an updated version, but anyway, it's been around a long time. It used to be called Dogan Keegan Mystical Realist, so maybe that's the difference between the 2004 version and the earlier version. I don't know. But I like it, and I think if you want just a good brief introduction to who Dogan was and what he said, this is a great place to start. It's a bit scholarly, it's a bit dry, it's not going to be whiz-bang, it doesn't have a picture of a dinosaur on the cover or anything like that, but it's nice. Another one I started and finished this year is another one that I've had for a long time, Commentary on the Song of Awakening. I've read most of this book before this year. I got it from Tonin O'Connor, who is the person who translated it, and I had an earlier version, which I did read, so it's published in 2015, so that's probably when I got it from her. But I had an earlier version a few years before that, printed out on paper, that she'd given me, and I'd read that, but I hadn't actually read the printed version until this year. So this is the printed version that is still available online. I checked to see if it was still available on Amazon and stuff, and it is. It's a great book. It's one of the... I think it's the only complete Kodo Sawaki book that's available in English. Kodo Sawaki was Gudo Nishijima Roshi's teacher, one of his teachers, and Nishijima Roshi used to talk about him a lot. There are a few other books. There is Discovering the True Self and Teachings of Homeless Kodo. Living and Dying in Zen also has a large section about Kodo Sawaki, but this is the only full book that I know of that's in English. If you go to Japan, there's tons of books by him. Still, a lot of them are still in print. That's the only one in English. Really good stuff, very philosophical and dense, but Kodo Sawaki is he's a much more, he's not nearly as philosophical and academic as Heejin Kim, who wrote this book. He's much more accessible, so this is probably a little easier, but not an easy book. Each Moment is the Universe by Dainin Katagiri. This is another one that I've had for a long time, and another one that I've read bits and pieces of. I've probably read all of the book before this year, but this year was the year that I chose to read it from page 1 to page 200 and whatever, 230 or something, I don't know, from start to finish. And it's a great book. So far it's my favorite of the books they've put out by Dainin Katagiri. I kind of always qualify that because what is it? Returning to Silence is the book that was put out during Katagiri Roshi's lifetime, and all the others came out posthumously. So the only one Katagiri had any personal input in was that, what did I just say? Returning to Silence. He didn't have personal input in this one because he was dead by the time it came out. But it's really great. It's a compilation of his lectures, mostly relating to Dogen's concept of time, but not always. Here's one I keep talking about all the time. I Am That, Nisargadatta Maharaj. I've said enough about this book, but it's a great book about it's a book of talks that Nisargadatta Maharaj did with people, conversations. I shouldn't say talks, they're conversations he had with different people who came to visit him. A short version of Nisargadatta's life is he ran a little cigarette shop and then had a kind of an awakening experience with a under the tutelage of a guru, and then he went back to running his cigarette shop, and people would visit him in his apartment, and he would talk about spiritual things, and eventually certain foreign people, non-Indian people, started seeing him, and one of them, Maurice Friedman, somebody Friedman, yeah, Maurice Friedman took some of the tapes that he'd recorded of these conversations with Nisargadatta Maharaj and compiled them into a book, and it originally came out in 3 volumes in 1973, and this is a compilation of all 3 volumes, so pretty good book. So kind of going along the Nisargadatta Maharaj kick, I also got a hold of this because I'd read, and I've talked about this, there's a thing online of Leonard Cohen talking to Ramesh Balsekar, who was one of Nisargadatta Maharaj's students and translators, and I found that there was this book by Balsekar about what he'd learned from Nisargadatta Maharaj, and it's pretty good. It's a good continuation of what goes on in I Am That. Kind of gives you the rest of the story of the guy's life, and I liked it. So, having liked that one, I got one of Ramesh Balsekar's solo books, and nothing to do with, well, I mean, they all have something to do with Nisargadatta Maharaj, because that was his teacher, but this is a solo book. This one's weird. I'm not sure what to make of this one. I like it enough that I started reading bits and pieces of it again after finishing the book. It's very philosophical, and it says things that no Zen teacher would say, and it's kind of like we in the Zen tradition tend to be sort of circumspect, I think is the word. We sort of there's sort of certain areas you just don't talk about. You're like, oh, if you explain that too much, you're just going into the area of speculation, and you might be you're just telling your own take on the thing, and maybe you shouldn't talk about that and so forth. Balsekar just talks about all that stuff, and it was kind of interesting to read because his opinions are quite similar to mine when it comes to that. But then I'm also going, well, when I think of those things, I think that's kind of speculative. I don't know if that's actually the way things are or just the way I think they might be. But he just puts it out there. Interesting way of doing things. Still don't know what to make of it. Here's another one I started and finished this year. Alan Watts' The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. I don't know what possessed me to pick this particular book, but it turned out to be real good, and I enjoyed it. And Alan Watts is a funny character. I've talked about him on this video channel before. When I first started doing Zen, about the only books you could find on Zen easily were books by Alan Watts and D.T. Suzuki. And I read a little bit of D.C. Suzuki, but I never read Alan Watts, because I would look at his books and I go, oh, I think people, when they look at my books, think of them the way I thought of Alan Watts' books when I looked at them. I think, this looks like pop culture, watered down Zen stuff. I want to read something more deeper than that. So I kind of passed him by and didn't pay much attention to him. Until maybe 10 years ago, I picked up his book, This Is It, at a store in Montreal, and I like that a lot. And then I picked this up this year, and I like this a lot. It's mostly about Advaita Vedanta, but it's also figures in some Zen stuff, and just the way he puts it is, I think, pretty good. So, liked it. And the last one I'll show you, which has nothing to do with Zen, really, is In the Court of King Crimson. My favorite band of all time, I would have to say, is King Crimson. The Beatles are a close second, but King Crimson, I just can't get enough King Crimson. I don't know. It's an acquired taste. A lot of people call them prog rock. I think I understand why people call them progressive rock, but they're so different from any. They don't really sound like Yes or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, although they share members with Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or Genesis, who also they share members with, but they don't sound anything like that. They're much more metal than any of those things. They're sort of like if Black Sabbath was smarter, they'd be King Crimson. I think they're a great band, and Robert Fripp is into some Eastern philosophies, although he doesn't really say exactly what they are. Gurdjieff, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. He studied for a while, so there is a bit of that influence, and he's probably aware of Zen, and he talks about the great moment in his life when he found out he didn't exist. And sometimes he talks about stuff like that in interviews. So interesting character. He's the leader of the band and the only member who stayed from start to current version of King Crimson. So I like this, and it's real thick and it's a real tough read. Another book that I've owned for a long time, but I was like, oh god, that's so big, I'm not gonna. But I just decided I'm just gonna finish it, and I did, and I liked it, and it's pretty good. So if you're into King Crimson, that might be good for you too. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I'm not recommending these books necessarily, and they're probably better books in the world or worse books, and I don't know that they're my favorite books or anything, but they're books that I read this year. So I don't know, some people ask what I read, and you might be interested, and there you go. If you want to donate to helping me buy more books to read, you can send a donation to the link that you're seeing on your screen, not the link, the URL that you're seeing on the screen, which will take you to links to my Patreon and PayPal, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can find the Patreon and PayPal links just below the screen. That is the only way I'm making my living these days, is by your kind donations. And I really thank you a lot, because it really helps. And if you don't have money, if you're having trouble, like a lot of people are, don't send me money. I'm not desperate or anything, but the reason I'm not desperate is because people keep donating. So thank you for those donations, and see you later. Have a good time all the time. Bye.